I was house sitting for a friend, and her dogs were acting crazy, barking at nothing, whimpering, etc. Eventually I heard a weird noise upstairs. I counted the dogs and they were all with me. You know that one person you yell at for looking around the house instead of just calling the police? Yeah, that was me. The knife drawer was baby-proofed and I'm an idiot, so I ended up grabbing a meat fork. I messaged a group chat that if they didn't get updates from me every 5 minutes, they should call the police. I went looking around, tried to bring a dog with me, but they were having none of it. Eventually I found the source of the noise and was relieved to see that it was just the sink. The sink was left running. I turned off the sink and texted the group chat. Never mind, it was just the sink. One of my friends replied, but who turned it on? I was home alone with my then 3-month-old. My guy was working overnights. I started hearing static over the baby monitor, so I get up and just to check to make sure everything's okay. I get to the doorway and I see a silhouette of a very tall man. Except it was like a negative of light where he was standing. The hallway light should have hit him and some kind of color should have been shown, but it was just black. Absence of light. Just standing there, watching. I reached around the door, flipped on the light, and grabbed my son. I turned for a quick look before I bolted, but he wasn't there. I stopped, turned off the light, and the shadow was there, but a few steps closer. I slammed the door, cracking the frame in the process, and spent the rest of the night in my fully lit bedroom with my little boy. This wasn't the last time I saw the Shadow Man in my son's room. My son is now 5 years old, and he's mentioned him a couple of times. This story took place in the late 90s. The invasion wasn't at my home, but in actuality my work. I worked at an accounting firm downtown. Everyone was away for the holidays since it was Christmas time. The day before Christmas Eve, to be exact. Myself and a handful of other coworkers were given access cards that allowed us access to our building. One of my bosses needed me to fax him some kind of report prior to the new year ending. My office had a fax machine, but it was on the second story of our building. In other words, it took me about 5 minutes to walk through the building to get to my office. I pull into the parking lot of my building and see it's completely desolate. As I'm getting out of my car, I do notice that one of the lights are on in the second story. Someone must be doing overtime or something, I think to myself. I get to the front door and unlock the door and begin my long walk through the dark building. The building is completely empty, just darkness and empty cubicles. Now normally, going through the office, I take the stairs considering the elevator takes some time and it's often crowded. However, considering these circumstances, I take the elevator. As I'm waiting for the elevator, I begin to hear sounds coming from the dark room of cubicles. It sounded like someone was trying to move without making any sound. But with the building being so empty, I was able to pick up the sounds. The elevator came and I promptly got on the elevator, closing it quickly behind me. I take the short elevator ride up and I exit on the second story. I quickly walk across the building to get to my office. As I am walking, I notice that one of the office's lights are on. This office is 3 offices before mine, meaning I'd have to pass it to get to my office. As I'm walking down the long and dark hallway, I glance into the lit office and look inside. There's no one inside, but the office was littered with papers, as if someone didn't care what they were doing and just making a mess. After seeing this, I quickly run to my office and lock the door behind me. I quickly make that fax to my boss, and I contemplate calling the police. But I realized how silly that sounded. Hello 911, I'd like to report a dirty office. Someone probably got canned before the holiday season and decided to leave a mess, and the janitors were not able to clean it up before. That's what I told myself, at least. I quickly unlock my office door and begin walking out into the darkness, with the only light coming from the office next to mine. I pass the office and again, no one is in there. I continue walking down the long hallway and the light from the office behind me goes out. Oh hell no. I begin sprinting to the elevator door, and to my horror, there's accompanying footsteps behind me, also sprinting. Thankfully, the elevator door is already waiting for me and is open. I jump inside and immediately mash the ground floor button. The footsteps are quickly coming to the elevator door, and I hear a loud thud right when the elevator door closes. I breathe a sigh, but then realize I have to walk through the whole first floor level again. When the doors opened, I immediately sprinted out of there as fast as I could. I get through the long, dark room and finally make it outside. Once I'm outside, I do not hesitate to call the police. Since my office is downtown and the police precinct is only a couple of miles away, they get there in about 15 minutes. I wait for the police to arrive and search the building. They then search the building and exit the building with 3 additional men in handcuffs. I was told by the police that they all had weapons, but I try not to think about it. I often think to myself, what would have happened had I not taken the elevator? My best friend in high school lived in an old plantation-type house. We would always hang out there during the summer, since both of her parents worked and we would have the whole house to ourselves. There was a wide front door that opened into the hall with doors leading to the living room, the kitchen, and bedrooms, as well as a wide staircase. All of the doors stayed closed off in the summer to help with the cooling that big house. One day, we were both about 14. We were there alone and in the back of the house, in the kitchen, making lunch. The radio was on, and we had been tanning outside. We were only wearing swimsuits with t-shirts. We heard what sounded like somebody walking up and down the front porch, so I go to the living room and look out the window. I don't see anything. I open the door to the hall and, standing at the front door, looking out, I still don't see anything. I then heard somebody say, "Hey!" and I turned around, and there is the biggest man I have ever seen standing about halfway up the staircase. I just froze. I couldn't move or speak. About that time, my friend reaches out of the living room and pulls me back into the room and slams the door. We ran through the kitchen and out the back door to the neighbor's house. The neighbor goes and runs the man off, but not before the man telling him that he thought it was a boarding house, and he was looking for a room to rent. After that, we were both a little OCD about checking that front door. About a week later, after that had happened, we saw the man's mugshot in our local paper for raping a young girl just up the street. Many years later, after my friend and her family had moved out of that house, the city condemned it and tore it down. When they did, they found 2 skeletons behind a wall that had been there since the 20s. Come to find out, it had been a boarding house many years ago. This fact doesn't really change the story much, but it's still pretty creepy. I used to sneak out of my window at night when I was a teenager. Our house was slightly away and lower than the road, so that you had to walk down a path to get to the front door. The path went right past my window, which faced the road, making it super easy for me to simply climb out and off into the night. Because of this bad habit, my mom used to often wake up in the middle of the night to come check on me to make sure I was still in bed. One night, as I'm laying awake, I hear her get up. I can hear my neighbors outside making a fair bit of noise, so I knew she'd come into my room thinking it was me trying to climb out of my window. I pretended to be asleep, but I can still hear her walking around our house, unsettled by the noises. I hear her go into the bathroom, which has a window facing out into the side of the house. 2 seconds later, she is thundering down the hall, wrenches open the front door and starts screaming at the top of her lungs. I basically jump out of my skin. I have no idea what is going on. I hear people running and yelling, all the while my mother is standing in her pajamas, screeching her head off. While she had been in the bathroom, she distinctly heard people whispering loudly, and her immediate reaction was anger that there were people on her property. When she ripped open the door, she found about 4 people, all with hoods over their heads and heavy-duty torches, in the middle of sneaking down our path and on either side of the house. Luckily, they just bolted when she screamed. I struggled to sleep in that room, where I could hear every little noise on that path outside until the day I moved out. certain that those people were going to return for whatever it was they wanted.